Come to Ben's English Lab, Ben's English Lab, Ben's English Lab.
Now, this is going to be an activity-based class, and I'll be providing the answers to these two questions on the board. The first question is, everything I recommend dash always act. Everything I recommend dash always act. We have four options. The first option is, everything I recommend are always act. B, everything I recommend dash always act. Everything I recommend be always act. C, everything I recommend is always act. D, everything I recommend will always act. That is all about the first question. Now, to the second question we have, I recommend that everything I said dash done. I recommend that everything that I said dash done. Now, we have four options also just like the first. I recommend that everything I said are done. I recommend that everything that I said be done. I recommend that everything I said is done. I recommend that everything that I said were done. Now that I've read out the questions and you see them for yourself, kindly go to the comment section right now and provide your answers to the two questions. The reason we're doing this is to test whether learning really took place in the last class. Remember, in the last video, what we talked about was the concept of mandative subjunctive concord. Mandative subjunctive concord. In that video, I did talk about what that concept is about, the structure that realizes mandative subjunctive concord. And finally, with that video, I did talk about the rules to apply when taking questions on mandative subjunctive concord, or when you have structure, you have to make expressions that have the structure of mandative subjunctive concord. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's right there on my YouTube channel at Ben Voice Narrative, and you're watching on TikTok. The video is on TikTok. It's also on Facebook. But I advise that you check on my YouTube channel because there I have other video lessons on grammatical concept. Okay. By the way, I'd like you to also state in the comment which of these questions is not subjunctive in nature. Let me know which one doesn't have the structure of mandative subjunctive concord. Is it the first question or the second? Or is it the case that the two questions are drawn or extracted from mandative subjunctive concord? So let's get to it. The first question is, everything I recommend dash always act. Is it everything I recommend are always act? Everything I recommend be always act. Everything I recommend is always act. Everything I recommend will always act. First of all, you should understand, you should know that this question has nothing to do with mandative subjunctive concord. And the reason is simple. A sentence or a question that requires mandative subjunctive concord usually has two structures. The first part of the structure is usually the main clause, which is the independent clause in other words, while the second part of the structure is usually a subordinate clause, and that subordinate clause is always a that clause. A that clause. Do we have a that clause in this place? No. Actually, this sentence is talking about everything. It's talking about what is recommended. The action is on the thing that is recommended, not on the person who is doing the recommendation. The focus is here. Another thing to point out is that for a mandative subjunctive structure, we usually begin the structure, the sequence, with the person performing the action. The subject always comes first. But in this case, in the case of this question, we have the object starting the sentence. Everything that I recommend, everything I recommend. Now, it is not I recommend everything. Did you see that? For this structure, the sentence begins with the object. The subject is right here. But in a structure that requires mandative subjunctive concord, you begin the structure, the sentence, with the subject. But in this case, the sentence opens with everything. So this question right here is testing your knowledge on indefinite pronoun. Just simple grammatical concord. Everything. Every time you see everything, everything here is indefinite pronoun. Indefinite pronouns are usually singular pronouns. So everything is singular. Everything is singular. So every time you have everything, the verb is usually singular. So everything I recommend is always act. Everything I recommend is always act. Where you don't use were with everything. You don't use be with everything. You don't use are with everything. So the answer is. Everything I recommend is always act. So that means that this doesn't follow the structure of mandative subjunctive concord. So let's go to the second question. Second question says, I recommend that everything I said, dash, done. I recommend that everything I said, dash, done. I recommend that everything that I said, dash, done. Is it I recommend that everything I said are done? I recommend that everything I said be done. I recommend that everything I said is done. I recommend that everything that I said were done. This is a typical structure of mandative subjunctive concord. Can you see we're starting with the subject of the sentence I recommend. Every time you see the word recommend, you see the word demand, you see the word request, you see the word pray, all of these words, every time you see them, you know that you have the subjunctive structure. Okay, now I recommend, this is the that clause. What do I recommend, or what did I recommend? In this case, what do I recommend? I recommend that everything I said, dash whatever. Dash whatever, because I can't give your answer now. So this is the second structure in the sentence, and this is the first. Like you're saying, I request that, we decided, we resolved that, I recommended, I requested, I pray. I recommend that this. Every time you see the structure, remember that for a mandative subjunctive concord, your answer is always having the base form of the verb. Your answer here must always be in the base form of the verb. You can have your verb in the present tense, you can have your verb in the past tense. It must always be the verb that doesn't have IES, that doesn't have ES, that doesn't have ED, that doesn't have ED. So the verb goes back to the natural state. So here, I recommend that everything I said are done is wrong. Why? This already is showing number. This verb are is showing plurality. Mandative subjunctive concord doesn't use a verb that shows plurality. It doesn't use a verb that shows number. It doesn't use a number that shows tense. So this is present tense, and then it's talking about plural subject. So I recommend that everything I said be done is the right answer. So the right answer is B. I recommend that everything I said be done. The reason is the base form of are is be, the base form of is be, the base form of were is also be. So this is the base form of all of these verbs here. This is were is the past tense of are. And if are is wrong, then this is wrong. Is showing singularity, and remember that the verb in the mandative subjunctive structure doesn't show singularity. It goes back to the natural form of the verb. For example, if you have the word go, the verb go can fit in here. You can have anything. You can have such words as goes. You can have goes. You can have went. You understand? Because these words show singularity, they show plurality. And of course, you're going to have the verb in the past or in the present, just the base form of a verb. So, which is what we have here. I recommend that everything that I said be done. So, that is it. Everything I recommend is always at. I recommend that everything I said be done. So, this is a typical structure for mandative subjunctive concord. And I'm sure that with this talking, with these exercises, you've understood better the explanation of mandative subjunctive concord. If you have any questions, kindly let me know in the comment. And I really want to believe that you got the answers correctly. I'll be checking in the comment right now. If you get to subscribe to this channel, remember to do that. Thanks for the support always. See you in the next video. Bye for now.